Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And this week brought a tremendous amount of news to World of Warcraft. We saw major updates to class tuning for PvE and PvP, and I wanted to cover some of the ramifications and aftermath of those changes, which specializations really showed up on top as a result of those. So you can keep your eyes on that as far as what you might be wanting to check out for this patch, as well as Blizzard just hit the ban hammer on a ton of intentional griefing going on in Mythic Plus, although a lot of these bans may potentially be misplaced, and it also makes me wonder what the future of potential banning is going to look like as well. So Mythic Plus obviously was the main target here. It was people who were leaving lots of keys, which, you know, in theory makes sense. You know, if you're in a group and you're running a key and maybe it's not going perfectly, but you really want to finish the key, you want to try and get your loot, and somebody decides they're going to leave, it's no longer worth their time personally, and it completely bones the rest of everybody else in the group. That's not a great time, so it makes sense that they would want to target this, as this is likely going to lead to a loss of player retention, especially if it's frequent and ongoing. But I think for a lot of groups, oftentimes as a group, they might just agree that, this key, we don't want to complete it anymore. So how is Blizzard going to discern the difference between the two, where it's somebody griefing a group that would like to at least finish the key versus a group that just kind of wants to abandon the key? And I think that this leads into the problem with the keystone upgrading problem, where if you fail the key, it goes down a level and you have to beat an older key level and then get it back to where it was. And this kind of not being in line with other content in the game. For example, if you wipe to a heroic boss, it doesn't make you go back and kill the previous boss or go back to the normal raid and kill the normal version of the boss before you can kill it again. So I kind of feel like the system is a little bit dated, which is likely leading into this type of griefing that's going on. And maybe like looking at the system before looking at the symptom might be a better option for them. But today we issued gameplay suspensions to players who intentionally left Mythic Plus groups a great many times. So you must have left a lot of these. But I saw a lot of like top ranking streamer Mythic Plus players also getting banned, and I'm wondering if maybe that was a mistake. We have seen PvP bans in the past. I think it was like at the end of one of the Dragonflight seasons where you'd see like pro players like Sea-Doo like, hey, I got banned. And I streamed every game I played. I definitely didn't win trade. So sometimes these systems aren't perfect, which is another danger of using them. But hopefully anybody who was banned incorrectly can kind of repeal that. In the War Within Season 1, the sort of behavior we actioned was either without regard for the experience of their fellow players, or in some cases even deliberately intending to harm others' experiences. This is detrimental to the community of players who strive to do their part in group content the vast majority of the time. We understand that occasionally abandoning runs will happen. Players can experience unexpected real-life emergencies, internet outages, or group collectively deciding to quit the run. Today, we suspended players who repeatedly and recklessly disrupted Mythic Plus groups. We continue to keep an eye on groups in the future, and repeat offenders are subject to escalating penalties, which then brings me into the discussion of like PvP banning. So one of the biggest problems that we're seeing in PvP is queue syncing, which is players for Battleground Blitz or Solo Shuffle will queue up intending to get each other in the same lobby or match, so that they can exploit that match with each other, whether it's they're all on the same team so they can work together more coordinatedly. I don't think that's a word, but you get the point. Or if they get on opposing sides, one player will purposely play not at full value so that the other player can get an easier win in order to boost their rating up. And one of the biggest tells that a player is doing this is that when the queue pop shows up on the screen, they don't accept it unless they both get it. So they're going to be declining a lot of these. And you might have experienced this where it's like a queue pops up and you wait, it says 5 out of 6 players or 15 out of 16 players or whatever it is. And then it goes away because one of the players didn't accept. And it pops up again. And then it goes away. And then it pops up again. And then it goes away. And I feel like if you see this happening more than like maybe once, that it's probably very, suspicious behavior. And it's one of those things where it's like, I've missed queues. I've gone up to the bathroom when I'm streaming and I missed a queue, popped and it disappeared. But that's the difference between like missing it once every 2 hours versus like missing it 20 times in a row. That is an obvious tell that that player is doing something very suspicious. You don't just miss 20 queues in a row, right? You're not standing up to the bathroom 20 times in that small of a time period. So I think one of the best ways for them to prevent queue syncing, and I think it also affects Epic Battlegrounds from what I've seen from players on forum posts as well, is to look at that. Look at like how many players are having a queue pop up and they're not accepting it. And if this is happening over a certain threshold of like, I don't know, like 3 per hour, probably even that's probably too high. Somewhere in that ballpark, it's like these players are likely doing something that's kind of manipulating the ladder to some extent, and likely should be looked into at least, because it's providing the same kind of detriment to the groups, whether it's Epic BGs, Battleground Blitz, or Solo Shuffle in that regard. So I'm glad that they're looking at trying to make the experience better for everybody in this sense. Hopefully these systems aren't as automatically banning people who don't deserve to be banned. And I'm wondering what it means for, looking at other parts of the game. I think most notably like PvP right now, because that to me seems to be like the biggest one for potential cheating. And especially if the population of the game is lower, cheating tends to go up because it's easier to queue sync with other players. When there's a lot of people playing, guaranteeing that you get a match with the person is tough because there's just a lot of people. You might not be able to do it. But when there's less people, especially as like the player base tends to go down on a patch, it becomes easier to do that, and people will exploit it. And I'm hoping that if they have systems to do this, that they would have systems to do that to combat that, because I think it's going to be an ongoing problem. But that's kind of the discussion here for the banning. Let's take a look at what's going on with leaderboard activity with classes. Let's start looking. So we've got the last 3 hours, and we can look at the last 24 hours. And I played 8 hours myself on the first day, so I've got like my own personal opinion of this. But you can see in the last 3 hours that there's a significant amount of rounds played on certain specializations. So we saw a very big uptick on Windwalker Monk, 418. And I would say that Windwalker Monk is likely, it benefited the most of any specialization in PvP. And I was wondering if maybe they did that on purpose because its representation previously was one of the lowest melee DPS. So they overbuffed it to try and get the numbers back up. And I think that definitely worked. Because when we look at the last 3 hours, it had 418 rounds. When we look at the last 24 hours, it had 7,600 rounds, which is way higher than it was getting previously. So if that was their strategy with this, it definitely worked. I'm a bit worried that they're going to still have to keep kind of their finger on the pulse for Windwalker as far as how good it is, because it seems to be doing really, 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 really good. Another one that got buffed was Marksmanship Hunter, which we see kind of just evening out. It's still kind of on the tail end. I think a Beast Mastery Hunter is still kind of just like performing a cut above. Survival is a completely different flavor, so you get that unique experience. The difference for Marksmanship is that you get burst damage. So I think a lot of players that want burst damage Hunter perspective, not sustained damage Hunter perspective, will switch to Marksman even if it's slightly worse than Beast Mastery. And that's why we see the numbers going, slightly up to about like 132. In the last 24 hours, let's see how much more it evened out with the other ones. It's getting even higher when we look at 24 hours. It's doing a lot healthier in that regard. So I do think the changes to Marksmanship Hunter definitely put it in the right direction. It's possible that Beastmaster Hunter needed like a little bit of a tune down at the same time, especially when you look at the feedback from the community. The specialization that I probably spent the most amount of time on was Fire Mage, which had like practically no participation. Prior to these changes, it was really this bottom of the barrel, and it still seems like it's kind of low here relative to Frost. Now, if we look at the last 3 hours, it's still kind of, tail ending. Frost is just absolutely dominating. And having played both Frost and Fire now recently, trying to get towards my 2400 challenge for Mage, I thought maybe Fire will be easier. So let's just switch Fire real quick and try and push up some rating. Fire and Frost feel a lot closer. I think the main problem between Fire and Frost is Frost just has really powerful snares and root procs. The way that they both kind of can do a lot of instant cast damage is valuable. I will also say that landing Meteor on Fire is way harder than landing it as Frost for some reason. When you press Comet Storm as Frost, like I can just press Comet Storm on a player, and like because I have so many snares and random Nova procs, like it guarantees that it lands. With Fire, I have to be really meticulous and like save certain abilities and coordinate them together and be in certain positions in order to actually connect my Meteor. And the Meteor doesn't even feel like it's stronger than Frost, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if there's like a PvP modifier on it as Fire and there isn't as Frost or something like that, but it feels really hard to actually connect your Meteor, unlike for Frost, and that's leading to one of the reasons why I think its burst damage is more difficult to actually land. And then Arcane also got some pretty significant buffs, and it kind of just chilled in the same spot. And I think today I'm actually going to play Arcane, and I did the 2400 challenge on it in Dragonflight and completed it and really liked it. So I'm going to send, I think, Arcane today on my stream, which I have linked in the description down below, to try and get a feel for this one and see it like direct comparisons relative to Frost or Fire. But you can see that it didn't really bump up too dramatically at this point in time. Now on Holy Death Knight, you guys just really like Death Knight, I think, in this game. Like Death Knights, you guys just like, you want to play Death Knight. Like even if it's bad, you guys want to play Death Knight. Death Knight's cool. You want to be Arthas. It's a really popular spec. But I actually think Frost benefited way more. So Frost, as the Riders of Apocalypse, is getting really big crits with Frost Strike. Like I'm seeing almost upwards of 3 million critical strikes. And usually when we see a specialization entering that territory, especially on an instant cast ability, they tend to kind of take over the entire ladder. So yeah, Frost DK, I think, definitely benefit more. Not that Unholy didn't benefit. I think Unholy is definitely in a lot better of a position than it was previously. I think that it's doing really good now. I think that the DK buffs definitely put them in a spot where they're going to be like uber competitive. Some other buffs that players were debating whether or not they actually went live was like the Holy Priest, and this is another thing that's just like somewhat annoying, which is why I'm going to play test again today. And maybe if they didn't go live, then they are live now, and we'll be able to know. Or maybe people are just copying them and they did go live. I don't really know. People were saying like certain changes didn't go live, and so it's tough for me to say for Holy Priest, although I did see more of them. And the numbers are coming up close to where like half of what Discipline Priest is at this point. Resto Druid's numbers have gone up as well. I think Resto Druid is a lot better now. I'm seeing like 1.4 million Swiftmen non-crit sometimes. Its direct healing is a lot higher. As long as you can play far away and not get swapped to, it feels like it's doing really good since the changes that went into it. Resto Shaman, I think, is definitely still lagging behind all the other healers. It's going to be one of probably the biggest struggle as far as like going after a healing specialization. Hellcaller Warlock, I was having high hopes for it. I didn't really get to see it, but a lot of players are giving criticisms that sustained damage isn't valuable. You have to play Soul Harvester because it has Haunt, Shadow Bolt, Burst, and that lets you end games, which I think does have validity to it. In Shuffle, though, I think that you can play dampening builds maybe with more success. Maybe the rounds don't last long enough. I'd say right now a lot of shuffle rounds usually end around the second 2-minute cooldown timer. You pop your first Icy Veins, everyone has cooldowns, they trade, and you pop the second Icy Veins, and then that's usually where stuff starts to hit the fan. And if Hellcaller needs to survive longer than that window in order to be viable, then it will obviously struggle. Arms Warrior, I think, is still kind of the dog of the lob. It's just not looking too good, although I didn't get to play it. Just me playing against it and seeing it just did not. But Fury felt crazy good. Like I think for the Warrior challenge, I'm honestly going to switch Fury. It seemed really strong, and I don't even know why. None of them were playing the Thunder Blast, which got like a double buff on the day before these changes went live or something like that. They're all playing Slayer still. Fury, I don't know what happened, man. This spec is just absolutely destroying people. So I'm thinking that I'm probably going to switch over to Fury instead of Arms, or at least I'm going to give Colossus probably one more go, and then if it doesn't work out, then I'm going to make my switch. I did see one Augmentation Evoker, and despite its representation being this low, it actually wasn't bad. It felt like Augmentation Evoker was actually really good. So I don't know if we'll see any swaps over from that, considering that Devastation in the last 3 hours is less than Boomkin, which was pretty surprising. It's actually still less than Boomkin, and I think Devastation Evoker is like one of the best specs to send at the moment in Shuffle. One of the best. Super easy, accessible, lots of power behind it. I kind of wonder if people are just shifting away from it to try some of the new stuff that's coming through. Ret Paladin feels really strong still. The Hammer of Light build definitely did some work for it to be more viable and more competitive. Other specs that are kind of sleeping at the moment is things like Outlaw Rogue. Whenever I see like Outlaw Rogue, it's like it just completely owns the lobby. It's a really good spec if you want to master it. Unfortunately, it's really bloated, really difficult to play, and didn't really get anything new or exciting as far as the expansion. So you're kind of just playing Dragonflight Outlaw Rogue, but with the tuning that it has, if you play it at the skill cap, it is remarkably powerful. And those are kind of just my initial thoughts running it through for a day. I'd say Havoc Demon Hunter is probably the least affected of all the specializations, which is what I was predicting. And I'll do a double checkup with my prediction tier list as well after I play today and see how on the money was I with predicting where the specializations would land on power, to kind of give myself some, what's the word I'm looking for? Accountability when I'm making those types of prediction lists, so that that they're not just entirely random or complete guesswork, that I am actually applying previous logic and anticipating. It's an educated guess. It's a hypothesis on where the specializations are going to land. And I think Demon Hunter definitely ended up being kind of small. It was like maybe a 2 to 3% overall damage increase, but pretty much everything else, Rest of Shaman, Demon Hunter, not really big winners. You're kind of going to be struggling. Armswear also kind of be struggling, but everything else seems to be doing decently well, or a lot better than it was previously, and it felt like almost a completely different game as far as like meta exploration and pacing, because you're seeing specializations that you didn't really see a lot of before. So I found that to be pretty fun. So hopefully this is going to get some players to come back, so the queue times can be a little bit faster. Especially with the buffs that they've given to some healing specializations. I'm hoping that's probably the main thing that's holding back the queues. But I'm probably also just going to be queuing a healer myself when I'm going through some of these challenges, in order to just give myself some faster queues, maybe give the ladder some juice in games as well, because playing a healer is just the best way to get games. If you really want to get games, play a Disc Priest. I mean, look at this thing. This is just the most fun healer in the game. It's really strong at the moment, especially if you're like a DPS player that's kind of annoyed that they have to play a healer. You'll feel less annoyed by playing a discipline priest, so you'll get all the benefits of a fast queue and still some of the DPS gameplay that you'd get from a DPS. So definitely recommend Disc Priest for anyone in that boat. But hope you guys enjoyed the update. Hope you guys enjoyed the video here. Thank you very much for watching. Hit the subscribe button. Your support is greatly supported. I am just completely fried after getting up out of bed, and I'm so fried I'm not even going to edit it out. It's all right. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one.